I'm a firm believer that there's several subjects, the human body, the human mind, um, even anything that's a complex adaptive system, like even an economy. We know, you know, we know a lot, but we know next to nothing. We don't even know what we don't know at this point.
Weird and Worthwhile Podcast.
Welcome. Today we spoke with Devin. He's a man who's been in the financial sector his whole life, and he has now branched out to do his own entrepreneurial enterprise in which he's helping people attain their financial freedom, but with a lot less stress involved. A lot of people seemingly have some number that they think they need to hit in order to retire comfortably, and a lot of what he finds himself saying to people, as he told us, is that getting to that number is easier than a lot of people think. And it doesn't need to be this big to-do and big stressful thing. This was a fun conversation because it really got flipped on its head and he became the interviewer of us. So we wound up talking about a lot of things that are very close to my heart: meditation, breath work, Kriya, and mindfulness, and ways that we can feel better within our physical body and within our mind in a very short period of time. Like, what are the small implementable steps we can actually take to feel remarkably better? I'm lucky enough to know of many of these things now, and I share a lot of those tools and techniques that have been so helpful to me in our conversation. Let's get into it.
We usually just shoot the shit. We might ask some questions, if you want to ask us questions. Yeah, it's pretty.
Yeah, it's a casual thing. I'm discovering that what we're actually doing here is just trying to get into a conversational flow state where some wisdom starts to come through that even we didn't necessarily expect to say. It's like, oh, good. I'm glad there's other people here to pull some good stuff out of me. So it's a very casual thing, but it meanders. Sometimes it's like, where is this going? Like, at least in hindsight, but I typically find that it does go to very worthwhile places. So we'll find out.
I love it. That's how my podcast is. There's no real structure to it. You just find an interesting, smart person, and then you just jam. Real quick though, so you seem like, Luke, you got like some sort of Zen background, which I love. I was actually kind of hoping for a guided meditation a minute ago.
Yeah, it could have been more involved. I wasn't quite sure
I love that.
how deep you wanted to go. So
yeah, I mean, I would have gone as deep as you would have wanted, I think. I mean, I don't know if I've gone like super deep in the past, but I think that breath is like really important. It's one of those things that I wish that I focused on a lot more, and I was literally just thinking about this yesterday, where I don't know if you guys have experience. I don't know if anybody has experience. I don't think I've ever asked this to anybody, but like sometimes, actually not sometimes, I'd say 2/3 of my days, I feel like some sort of shortness of breath. Especially because I feel like I'm talking like most of my days, right? I'm in meetings, almost all day, most days. And right now I can feel myself kind of sitting up, good posture, nice breaths, and I feel like I'm enunciating well. But again, podcast, meeting, I feel like I get, I don't know what you want to call it, but like my voice just isn't strong. My breath isn't strong. Does that make any sense to you? Like, yeah. And so we'll get into that in a second, but like I'm pretty sure that I need to practice better breathing. That sounds weird, but it's the truth. Like, it's in another vein, like I study a lot of history, right? And I'm reading this this guy, you might know him. He's the cultural tutor on Twitter. He has this great newsletter every week, and there's like 7 topics, and it's typically like what do you call it? Like traditional topics, painting, sculpture, and one of them is rhetoric. And so he goes over every week like typically a different like strategy or type of rhetoric. And there's all these like, it's this ancient skill set that, it's mostly been unlearned or at least tweaked a little bit. And I think it was last week, he does a quick biography of Demosthenes, which was apparently the greatest rhetorician. I know how to read it. I don't know how to say it. Rhetoric person, speaker, public speaker of ancient times, and even better than Cicero, who we consider to be the best of all time. And I guess he had a stutter or a lisp, and he would practice for months or years to get rid of it. And just he was like I guess he was born sickly and didn't have like a strong voice, but he taught himself to have a strong voice. And even as I'm talking now, I can feel my breath getting, I don't know what the word is, man, weaker. So I just said a lot there, but basically what I'm trying to get at is like, I need better breath.
Mm.
And I'm curious if you guys have any tips, tricks, methods, practice to get better at that. So please, like, tell me, inform me.
Yeah, I have a few tips for you. I mean, this has been a huge investigation of my own for the last 8 years or so. And one of the most crucial elements that you want to start with is, am I breathing paradoxically? Because a lot of people are. And what that means is that you are drawing the belly in as you inhale. So you're kind of like, you're inhaling the belly in and then you're exhaling the belly out. And some people breathe this way. I think I did for a chunk of my life. But the problem with this is that you're actually stealing space from your lungs as you're inhaling. So it doesn't really make sense. But I don't know if it goes hand in hand with this notion of like, I need to suck in my gut. And like people are like, oh, when I suck in my gut, it must be on the inhale, of course. Or it's just, some neuronal pattern that got put in there for some reason. But you want to let your belly expand. You want to let your lungs expand on the inhale. And then on the exhale, you want to be drawing the belly in. So that's absolute stage one. Figure out if you're doing that correctly or not, because that is going to create more space in your lungs. It's going to result in a deeper, more satisfying breath. And beyond that, it's mostly just practice. We can expand lung capacity in a lot of ways. I was doing one of them in our little meditation right before the recording started, and that's breath of fire, where you're doing this active breath of just, it's actually something that deep sea divers or free divers do before they go down, because it actually gives you more lung capacity. So you're actually able to retain more air, and it's really good for clearing out mental garbage and junk. So I do it all the time. It's also a really good technique for people who want to stop the smoking habit, whether that's cannabis or cigarettes. It's like a really good thing for that. And then beyond that, it's, just doing a little bit of what I encourage you to do. There's this long, deep breath where you're just paying attention to the 3 segments of breath, being belly, ribs, upper, like chest. So you're breathing into belly, just focusing on that, letting the ribs expand to the sides, letting the chest rise, and then going in the opposite direction for the exhale. And you just really slow that down. And that could even be extended out into like a box breathing thing, where you're inhaling for a set time, holding the breath, exhaling for a set time, holding the breath out. Maybe it's just 4, 4, 4, 4. Maybe it gets up. If you really get up to 15 on each of those increments, then you're hitting something very special. And well before that too, even when it's about 8 seconds per increment, I think you're getting some good stuff there. So that's a kind of a bombardment of information, but those are different techniques that I've all found to be really helpful. And the value of a lot of them is that you don't need to be doing something different. You can just start to pay attention to your breath as you're doing whatever it is, the meeting, the speech. And one more thing while I think of it is, just in terms of vocal strength, this is something that was impressed upon me in 2 areas of tutelage, one of them being stage performance, which I did a fair bit of in high school, and the other one being yoga. And in both instances, they said, pay attention to your navel center. You want to project from the navel. So you want to like be very connected to the area just 2 fingers or a couple inches below the belly button. So that navel center, if you're speaking from your navel center, it's going to carry a lot more power. And if you're just talking from up here, then it's not really very much. And just as you're getting more involved in what you're saying, you may be paying less attention to that. And then you might find yourself just in the upper register. So
Yeah.
This is all great. Go ahead, Chris.
I'll just add 2 more. Wim Hof method is like a breathing method I've enjoyed. It's kind of fun. And then another one is 4, 7, 8. So it's like a 4-second inhale, a 7-second hold, and then an 8-second exhale. And then there's alternate nostril breathing, where you close one nostril and then inhale and then So there's so many different breath practices, and they're all great, and you can kind of like have them in your toolbox. And then really, I think that simply paying attention at all to your breath is like the main thing, and just being conscious of what's happening and basically just avoiding shallow breathing. You'll do great.
Yeah, the breath typically becomes more shallow as we get worked up, as we get anxious, as we get more in our head. So I can see that as you're in a rather technical conversation in these meetings, you're naturally going to start breathing in a more shallow manner. So that's where the conscious attention comes in, and you bring the attention to the breath, and you're just like, I'm just going to consciously deepen the breath now. And even just returning to that periodically at some set frequency is going to help you out a lot. Some people even set a timer on their phone, and they're just like, at 3 or 4 junctures during the day, I pay attention to how deeply I'm breathing. And in so doing, hopefully I'm setting the tone for the rest of the day with these deeper breaths, or at least the return to the breath that I'm actually interested in.
It would be an interesting experiment. Just have like a phone reminder, like a ridiculous amount, like every 10 minutes throughout the entire day.
That would be the most effective, but it would obviously be annoying.
And then I just remembered another one I love is the double inhale. You just like inhale twice, and then that really fills up your lungs, and then slow exhale through the mouth is even the best. Double inhale through the nose and then slow exhale through the mouth is a great one.
Yeah, I'm a believer in this stuff. Chris might know I'm a general skeptic and a snarky skeptic at that to most things, but believer in this. Anyways, I had a follow-up question, Luke. So you said like below the navel, like you speak from there, right?
You speak
How,
from
how
the
do you
navel.
like how do you do that though? How do you know you're doing it right?
You'll hear the difference, and you'll feel the difference. Your voice carries a greater weight. There's certain words that might even feel like they make more sense. Like I've been encouraged to say hey instead of saying hi, because hi is kind of like it goes toward that upper register more easily, whereas hey just very naturally comes from that area. So it's more of a navel projection. And you can bring your conscious attention down to that area too, and you can see if you're doing it. You could also even like place a hand on it and kind of push in on it. And as you're pushing in, you're naturally going to feel that it happens more of the it's like it's going to come out stronger when that area is engaged.
I would imagine posture has a lot to do with it as well. Do you have
Yeah,
Posture helps.
use your back, I think you like, and breathing has a big thing like to do with it. Like I know that singers do breath work, and simply being relaxed, and your voice is gonna be more confident. And one thing that I think about is upspeak. So I don't know if you've heard of that term, upspeak, but it's at the end of a sentence when you inflect upward, and like it indicates like uncertainty. So it's, I think, being like cool, calm, and collected will just naturally take care of a lot of upspeak, and breathing is kind of upstream of that.
You guys have, maybe this is the last question. Any resources, YouTube channel, book, article, blog, anything like that?
Breath by James Nestor.
With a book?
Yeah. He was on the Joe Rogan podcast. If you want to just kind of hear some other stuff he has to say.
Okay. I'll check that out. Yeah, it's just something, try to improve, right? And breath is definitely something I can feel myself doing it now. I'm hunched over. I'm not talking from my belly. Like I don't know. I'm probably not breathing. There's probably a whole host of things that I'm doing wrong. And I think it only helped me in like my day to day. So I'm definitely gonna be diving into this. There's another kind of I guess problem. Not a problem. It was just a dumb little thing that I have. Is like I yawn a lot. Like even when I'm not tired. And I'm even doing it this morning, got great sleep, woke up at at the right time, been drinking my coffee, had a nice little breakfast, and I'm still just like yawning, and I yawn all the time, and it drives me crazy, especially if I'm in a meeting, it like looks bad if I'm like yawning, right? Like that's not a good look.
So
And
what's the
I
interval
have to
between
think,
yawns? Like how long do you go between yawning typically?
I don't know if there's like a trend, a minute or 5. I don't know. I'm not like constantly yawning, but it's like, and obviously as I'm talking about it, I want to yawn, but I don't know. It's just weird. And I'm not tired. It's just
Definitely connected to breath. But go ahead, Luke.
Yeah, it is connected to breath. what a lot of people don't recognize about yawning is that it indicates a state change. So we have this typical connotation in our culture, like, oh, you must be tired when you're yawning, like, because you yawn near the end of the day when your brain and your being is starting to transition into preparedness for sleep or a different state of being. But we're also yawning in the morning as we transition into greater wakefulness. And I know that whenever I do a lot of my more involved meditations, like some of the 31-minute meditations that I do, and or even the shorter ones, when I'm finished or near the end or even during, I find myself yawning. And that's because there's a shift in consciousness. There's a state change that's taking place there. And that's a welcome thing. That's just kind of an indication that that's what's happening. There may be other utilities of yawning that I'm not covering here, but I know that this is the one that I hone in on because I'm like, oh, okay, something is shifting. And for me, shift is what I'm interested in because I'm lucky enough to have encountered a bunch of techniques, meditative breath techniques that can help me to shift states without leaning on external things for that shift, because so many people in the world want to experience a shift in the way that they are, and they might reach for coffee to do that. They might reach for alcohol or some drugs or a cigarette or something, or some like, you know, maladaptive technique to do it, like gambling or whatever it may be. But there are other ways to experience shift, and there are ways that can produce a beneficial effect and can actually nourish the rest of your life. So this is something that I'm really passionate about bringing to people.
Interesting.
One hypothesis I have is that you might be able to replace your yawns with some kind of conscious breath.
I mean, it makes sense to me. As far as I know, and you know, I'm certainly no expert, but we still don't know exactly why we yawn. Are you guys on the same page there? Like, nobody knows for sure like what a yawn is or is for. And Luke's point, or I guess thesis about change of states is probably as good of a theory as any other, right? I mean, who knows?
Well, I've certainly heard that they haven't quite been able to pin down why we have this community yawning effect, so that people respond to the yawns of others. And there's like, if you hear a yawn, you're very likely to also yawn. And it can even happen at a remove. Like if you see someone yawn in a movie, you might yawn. So there's some social cues that go into that, which are not fully understood either.
It's like, you know, people think you yawn when you're tired, and I certainly yawn when I'm like exhausted. But the vast majority of when I'm yawning, I don't know why. Is it to get oxygen to my brain in a more efficient manner? Is it you know, who the hell knows?
Maybe
I don't know.
like your limbic system wants you to take a long deep breath, and it manifests as a yawn.
But even yesterday, like I was noticing it because I was I was in back-to-back meetings, and by like, you know, 90 minutes in, I was just like talking way too much and we're just like running out of breath, right? And then I don't know if that was the cause, but for the rest of the day, I just felt like a shortness of breath, and it kept like all day I was like focused on my breathing. And yeah, I don't know. I think that it's something that I'm just gonna have to incorporate into kind of not only my daily life, but also probably every hour, you know, at the very least, just being able to get into that space. And like you said, Luke, just have a practice of it. So I would imagine now that maybe not, but now you're probably used to just, you know, whatever it is, every 30 seconds, every minute or whatever, to just taking those breaths, doing that practice. Is that right?
It comes more automatically now. So
Yeah, I mean,
I can notice it without
be.
the reminder. Yeah, I notice when I'm getting shallow, and then I correct. And sometimes, you know, there'll be periods where I'm doing it wrong, for just like everybody. But it's easier for me to catch it now, and it's easier for me to drop into the deeper breath, because as we're breathing deeper, we're naturally going to be more relaxed and comfortable. The two just kind of go together.
What are your thoughts on naps?
Naps are great.
Oh, the best.
When, for how long?
After lunch.
Like how, you know, like where are you laying down? Are you sitting up? Like, you know?
I lie down on my couch, and I just lie flat on the couch and just close my eyes. And if I like totally like fall into like a deep sleep, then that's fine. I usually wake up after like 20 minutes. But if I just I don't even necessarily have to like be completely asleep. I can kind of be in this rest mode, and that's fine. You know, 15, 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes. And then that just kind of like, it makes my day like 2 days. I get two for one.
I do
Yeah, I
something
think that's
called
go ahead, Luke. Go ahead.
deep relaxation, which is accompanies most of the physical yoga that I do, the Kriya. So after that, there's a deep relaxation period where for about 7 minutes, I'm just lying flat on my back, palms up, let the feet roll away from one another, and I just do a little body scan where I'm relaxing every piece of my body individually with attention, and then I just let everything go. And it's like Chris said, it's a very rejuvenative thing, even though I'm not necessarily falling asleep. And sometimes I do fall asleep, and that's okay too. And then I'll have a little like 5-10 minute nap, and I'll typically wake up. But that is just such a good thing, because that is in the vein that we've been speaking of. It's a training exercise, and you're training yourself how to relax. So you're actually giving yourself an opportunity every day to practice relaxing the various sections of the body where we might otherwise just be holding tension. And as we begin to do that in the individual pieces, it happens systemically, and then we are more relaxed, and then we're breathing deeper, and we're typically happier, more confident. Just a good thing. But yeah, I also have I like to swim, and when I swim, for some reason, I need a nap after a swim. I run a lot. Like, I've been an avid runner for 20 years. I can go for a big run. It doesn't make me need to go to sleep. I can still carry on the rest of my day. But for some reason, swimming, I must go to sleep. I haven't quite figured out why that is, but it has to happen.
Are you like getting out of the pool and laying down right there? Or?
No, I can make it home. I can make it wherever I'm going. But yeah, I'm definitely exhausted to the point of needing a nap. And it doesn't need to be much. It could just be 10 minutes or 15 minutes. But for some reason,
Probably should be more than an hour, because that might kind of set you back at night.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. We man, I don't even know where to go here, but like, we live these this in this age, like a relic of the industrial age, and we have these like 8-hour blocks, 8 hours of work, 8 hours of sleep, and then 8 hours of leisure or whatever.
You mean cooking, cleaning, going to the bathroom, and all that?
Yeah, and it's like, I don't know, man. Like, I don't know if this was ever. I know siestas are a thing in Spain and elsewhere, but like the loss of the nap time is like got to be like one of the greatest tragedies of the modern age, at least to me. Like, I love my naps. I don't have to do it every day, but and it's typically a quick 15-20 minute thing. Sometimes I fall asleep, sometimes I don't, but that gets me going, like Chris said, for like his kind of second day, right? And then yoga, for me, yoga is fascinating because I have this little 15-minute routine on YouTube that I do, and it's primarily to like stretch out my back and like relieve pain and all that. It's 15 minutes, 16 minutes, in and out. Obviously heavy focus on the breath. And not only does it help with my back, but it's one of those things where like yoga is like this like panacea. Like, it's if I'm tired, it wakes me up, right? And if I'm awake and I need to go to sleep, it'll calm me down, right? So it's just like this like cure all for me, right?
Yeah.
It's amazing. It's just amazing, and it's a 15-minute thing. It's not, I've done like real yoga, and it's hard. Like, I don't like it. Like, I've woken up, I've done like actual yoga where it's like really hard. You're doing these crazy positions. The next day, like, I couldn't move my neck. Like, I don't want to do like hard yoga, whatever you want to call it, power yoga, whatever. But like easy yoga, yin yoga, up to like some sort of like mid-level thing, it's just amazing. I mean, it's one of those things that like everybody should be doing, right?
Luke, do you want to fill in Devin with your background around yoga?
Sure. So yeah, I've been a yoga practitioner for about 8 years. I've been teaching Kundalini yoga for about 7 years. And I like Kundalini yoga because it focuses on the endocrine system. And so it's creating glandular secretions that have a systemic effect in just making us feel better, or like creating some of the shifts that you might be interested in, like more energy or preparedness for sleep, or all of these things. But it is just really fascinating, as you say, that it seems to help with everything, especially if you find one that resonates for you as a human. Like, I never really resonated fully with a lot of the Western vinyasa yoga classes that happen in yoga studios. I went to maybe a dozen of those, and it didn't really speak to me. But then when I started doing this Kundalini yoga, then I was really starting to get something out of it. And it had a lot of different sets, like hundreds of different sets, and they were all had a very specific outcome that they were attached to. And they were like, if you have a sore back, you do this. If you can't poop, you do this. If you and remarkably, it seems to deliver quite reliably on those things. Like I was sleeping, I just got back from a week in Ottawa, and I was staying at my sister's old apartment, and she had to move all of her stuff out. So there was not really enough furniture there for us, but we still wanted to spend some time, my girlfriend and I, there and do some fun vacation-oriented stuff. But we didn't really have a proper bed, and the bed that we had wasn't really enough for us to sleep on it without disturbing each other. So I did the manly thing, and I said, okay, I'm going to prioritize your sleep, and I'm going to take the hit, and I'm going to sleep over here on this little like foam thing that we've brought. So I was pretty much on the floor on a foam thing for like 3 or 4 nights near the end. And I would wake up with not a good feeling in my back. Like my back was not doing well. To the point that one point I was even like in spasm. Like I tried to like sit up, and it was just like my muscles gave out. I think I actually had like, so I needed to be chiropractically adjusted by her just to get back to functioning. But all of this to say, I have a sequence, and that sequence takes 15 minutes, and it's the Kriya for the back, and it really, really works. You might have a sore back again the next day, but for that day, you will be right as rain if you do this sequence. And I love it. And whenever I have a sore back, and I do have a kind of a recurring injury in the center of my back that bugs me sometime, if that's ever acting up, I do this sequence for 15 minutes, I'm good for the day. And then the next day, it's not as bad.
So is this sequence like the same type of yoga? I don't remember the name. Is
Yeah,
it like
so
a piece of that?
It's within Kundalini Yoga. And
Okay.
just for anyone who might have their video on, I'm going to show you what I feel to be the most valuable piece of the whole sequence, which is the very first exercise. This is a lower back helper. It's kind of a weird looking thing, but I'll show it to you. Okay. So you sit cross-legged.
The revelation is that Luke's been sitting on the ground here.
He didn't know for like a year. He's like, you're
That's
sitting on the
wild.
ground this whole time? He's like, yep, this is my happy place, down on the ground. So what you do is you raise the knees up high and lower them. You inhale them up, lower them down, and the hands are like this. And so you lift one arm up, inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. And you're like sitting up with tall posture. Inhale, exhale, inhale, exhale. If you do that for about 4 minutes, and that, if you're sitting up tall with the right posture, it just totally takes care of the lower back. And so many people have lower back issues, especially people who have desk jobs and are like hunched over or whatever it is. But that will fix you up. My dad actually had a really bad back injury. I forget how he did it. I think it was a snowboarding accident. But I got him doing this, and he had like almost no mobility. And he was doing this for a couple of weeks. And throughout that period of time, he recovered very quickly. And now he's just totally fine. So I can't attribute all of it to that. Obviously, the body takes care of itself. But in the short term, this is a really good fix.
Yeah, I found basically a cure-all stretch on YouTube for my personal lower back problems. And that's just like lying on your side, doing leg lifts somewhat behind you. And that you do those leg lifts, and then you hold that leg up behind you, and basically the activating those leg movements opens up that lower back, and if it makes sense because your legs are pulling on that lower back.
Yeah, it's funny. We all have our own versions of lower back issues.
Yeah.
And I mean, it seems to be just kind of just a universal problem that all humans, or at least I don't know, human males face, right? And who knows why, right? Because there's no, I don't know whether you're a factory worker or a bricklayer or an office worker or an NBA star. Like we all have back issues, right? It just seems to be a function of
We
the
do,
human
but
body. I don't know.
I think what I'm getting from this, and this is part of a conversation that I had this past week too, is so many of the good show muscles that people would go to the gym for, like biceps, triceps, like upper back that looks good, shoulders, none of that really takes care of the lower back overly much. So for people who don't dedicate a whole lot of time to the gym, and they get there, they're like, I want to look better, I want to be more attractive to the gender of my choice. It's like, I'm going to focus on those muscles that are going to achieve that effect, as opposed to doing kind of the the lower back things. And even to do the lower back things, I think sometimes you need to involve the abs, and a lot of people don't have the greatest ab strength, and so they might kind of hurt themselves when they're trying to do some of the stuff for the first time. But I'm finally in a place, after having been pretty consistent at the gym for like 5 months or so, that I'm like, okay, I'm happy with most of the muscles that are going on here. Now I can finally start to address some of the weaker things like rotator cuff and like lower back and oblique and all of those things.
So I know what injured my lower back was a bunch of things really, but the big ones were probably like taking a lot of big hits in mountain biking, like downhill mountain biking is pretty hard on your lower back. And then when I drove across the country, that amount of sitting in the car was pretty gnarly on the lower back. And then actually CrossFit was really hard on my lower back, doing things like muscle ups and stuff like that, like really aggressive gym movements, and actually touching my toes, like that stretch where it's a super common stretch. You just like, stand up, touch your toes. If you don't bend your knees while you do that, you're straining your lower back.
What do you guys do in terms of like weightlifting?
I don't do any weightlifting.
Nothing. You don't do any weightlifting?
No, I just do
You're
push
lying.
ups, yoga.
Have you seen this guy's arms, Luke?
I don't own a gym membership. I don't own any free weights, nothing. I just do
Let's get a
push-ups.
better look at the arms here.
I've caught a glimpse of them. The dude's ripped.
Yeah, I see it.
Yeah, so people ask me that all the time. Yeah, just push-ups, yoga, and I don't eat a lot of carbs. And I do a lot of mountain
Steroids,
biking.
right? Steroids, part of it.
I do a lot of mountain biking, and it's also in my physique. Like I have larger, arm and leg muscles than I think generally people do. I mean, I'm kind of a shorter guy, so I don't know if that makes a difference.
It could.
Interesting.
Yeah, when I was just a teenager, that's all I used to do was just run and push-ups. And like that does a lot. Surprisingly, that takes care of a good chunk of it. I enjoy running a lot more than I enjoy running a lot more than actually lifting at the gym, but there is something about using the upper body muscles at the gym that's very satisfying. Like in the same way that yoga is satisfying, in the same way that meditation is satisfying, there's kind of a thank you from your body that gets sent when you're using some of the upper chest muscles. I don't know if that's a masculine thing or if that's just an anyone thing, but it's like I feel like my body is thanking me for using those muscles every time.
Maybe
especially
like a
after
release,
a long absence. Yeah,
some sort of a release of some chemical that. Yeah, I mean, who the hell knows? I'm a firm believer that there's several subjects, the human body, the human mind, even anything that's a complex adaptive system, like even an economy. We know a lot, but we know next to nothing. We don't even know what we don't know at this point in a lot of those subject areas. That's my belief. But
in biology, you mean?
Yeah, biology is one of those things. I believe. I know I can't say that last time I really read up on biology, but the human body, we don't know how things, nutrition, for example, like we just don't know how things work in the human body.
Well,
at least we don't have an overarching theory of how things can work. We might know how one piece of food affects this part of the body or whatever, but there's this sea of information, and we're just this little boat floating in it, and we figured out a lot in the last 100 or 200 years, but there's just so much more to actually know.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, the thing about scientific investigation is that so often it's just trying to reduce down the number of variables to something where they can actually make a logical conclusion about something. But we live in a plethora of variables, and it's very challenging to reduce something down to just a small enough variables that you can really say, oh, okay, it's very obvious that this effect is caused by this and not just correlated to it. But in so doing, we may even be extracting other variables, which are supporting factors that, when included, create the shape and reality of a life that we actually experience, and not just something that happens in a laboratory setting. So we're doing the best we can, I guess, as humans, but I do agree with you that we know very little, and in that way, it's not necessarily advisable to just jump on to the next piece of scientific knowledge that comes out and be like, okay, we got it now. It's this, and now everybody do keto diet. It's like, okay, now everybody do whatever we just figured out to be kind of helpful. It's like, probably not. No, like there's a lot of individual variability among humans, and even within that, we might be completely missing the point with what we just figured out, and it's actually dead wrong 20 years later, or it's dead wrong right now, but we didn't know it yet.
So, the thing that I'm writing about now is how like there's some confusion, it appears, in what the human genome is, and so there's like the human cell, right? And every human cell in your body has the human genome. And 25 years ago or so, they sequenced the human genome, and this was like this big thing, as presented as this massive accomplishment, and it was, but it wasn't really didn't have the profound implications I think that people were hoping for, that they'd be able to look at your genome and then know exactly what's going on, and know exactly what you should eat and what you should do and all that. But one of the reasons, I think, is because actually most of the cells in your body, about half of them are not human cells. It's about a 1-to-1 ratio between human cells and non-human cells. So that's bacteria and other things, but they call that the microbiome. And I find that really fascinating, because there can be a massive amount of diversity in the microbes that are inside different people, and that can change a lot throughout your lifetime. And so it's actually tremendously empowering to think that the full body genome is not just the human cell genome, but it's the human cell genome plus all these other species. And that's really your genome, because they're doing a lot of processing of food and creating neurochemicals and stuff like that. So what I'm getting at is, if we can understand more about the microbiome, perhaps we can have more like personalized advice around health.
That's kind of the holy grail, right? Personalized advice.
Right.
Yeah. It's definitely the way that the system needs to trend toward. And I'm struck by this image as you're saying that. A lot of people like to have a pet. They like to, many people want a dog or a cat or a raccoon or something. But we kind of have a lot of pets, or we kind of have an aquarium or a terrarium going on within us at every moment. And you can take that how you want it. You can be like, I'm disgusted by that. Or you can be like, that sounds kind of cool. There's like, I have many millions of pets,
Trillions,
or companions, helpers, and I should be conscious of them, and I should include them in some of the decisions I'm making. Like a lot of people have an easier time doing something that's helpful for someone they love in their life or someone else than they are doing it for themselves. So maybe we can take that attitude and be like, you're not avoiding that processed food, or you're not making a good dietary choice just for you. You're making it for you and the millions of terrarium inhabitants that you have within you. It's like, think of the children. Come on.
Yeah, like when people say go with your gut, they're talking about listening to their microbiome, because there's a bi-directional pathway between the brain and the gut.
Yeah, I think that's going to be I don't know, the next couple of decades, where that knowledge kind of becomes mainstream and just kind of passes down. I don't know. I think nutrition and all that is really important. So we'll see where that heads.
So I had a question for you, Devin.
Yeah.
So you have some expertise in the financial sector. Is this right?
Yeah.
Is there anything within that realm that you find yourself to gravitate towards, and which you would describe as being kind of a weird development? You're like, this is weird, but I've started to notice that within financial sectors, there's this weird thing that goes on, and it's worth paying attention to. And it's this kind of phenomenon, or it's this subset of whatever everything else that's going on. Does that strike any notes with you?
Yeah, man.
It's
I
kind of
love this.
broad, but I don't know what I'm
No,
talking about, and I'm hoping you do.
yeah, I think I got a decent answer. Let me take a breath, right? Reminds me of Ace Ventura when he sucks into the air and goes in his thing. So backing up a bit, I've got 20 years of finance experience, right? And that's in the markets, it's in the numbers, it's in the spreadsheets. And I'm certainly fascinated by the human side of all this stuff, which is probably the most impactful piece of it. But we typically don't recognize that, right? We think that, and I harp on this to Chris a lot because he's a Tesla bull, and I have said, like, it's not about a discounted cash flow model. It's just about investor feelings and emotions, right? On any given day or month or year or whatever. That being said, coming into the personal finance space, I can say I've been studying it fairly intently for 2.5 years, something like that. And I've been a big proponent of the psychology of money in general, and this idea that money is a mindset, right? And it's really all about how you feel about your personal financial situation, right? In the sense that you can have 5 million bucks and feel poor, and you can have 5,000 bucks and feel rich, right? Money is just a mindset. It's not about the number. Okay. And so I've been operating kind of from that framework for quite a while now, but I still see examples of that almost on a daily basis. And I'm just so fascinated by that. Right. On there's kind of a spectrum or a strata of these feelings, and I see it from kind of every aspect. Again, rich people worrying about how much like a $15 tip at breakfast, and poor people giving away money without any problem, and kind of living the life of their dreams. And ultimately that's kind of what it's about, is just feeling confident, feeling empowered, feeling comfortable, feeling safe around your kind of life and your money. And that's ultimately like what I'm trying to do. So I'm just trying to get people away from, like, not only of the traditional path of like work, retire, die. Like, that's, if you want to do that, that's fine. I shouldn't say that. Let me take that back. I'm not trying to push them away from that. I'm just trying to educate them that there is a different way, right? Most of us, and even young people these days, still like we think that that's how we have to do it for whatever reason, because our parents did it, because that's just what we're
What was
told in
that?
high school and college. What's that?
You said something about corporate hire die or something?
Oh, no, sorry. Work,
Retire, die.
retire, die.
Oh, work,
Just that
retire,
model.
die.
It's the whole pathless path thing, right? With
Right.
Paul and that whole crew. And that's why it resonated with me so well, is that,
Yeah.
again, I don't really have a dog in the fight. Like, I want you, and whether you're a client or a friend or whatever, to be happy, right? Whatever that means to you. And all I'm trying to do is educate you that you don't have to do it that one way that society tells you to do, right? And in that same vein, again, it's all about money psychology, right? And so I guess that's answering your question, Luke, is that that's been it's one of those things where, like any deep font of knowledge or information, the deeper you go, the more fascinated you are, and the more you realize you have to learn, right? There's no chance of me ever being an expert, a true expert on this stuff. But I'm going to keep digging. I'm going to keep learning, and I'm going to keep kind of coaching, right? And just helping folks, right? So I don't know. I'm not going to say it's mainstream. It's certainly not mainstream. It's a small but growing piece of financial advice, right? You go and talk to 100 financial advisors, one or two is talking about this actively, right? That being said, there's a small wave of folks that are talking about this, and I think it's going in that direction. It's going to kind of be the future, right? And I don't want to downplay the numbers side of it, because that's incredibly important. It's incredibly important. Without that, it's almost the foundation, right? Because without that, it's really tough to live any sort of fulfilling life if you make $1,000 a year, right? So you got to get that taken care of, provide that foundation. But from there, it's almost like this like hierarchy of needs, which, whatever. Anyways, I'm babbling at this point, but that's what I'm constantly being fascinated by every single day.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's definitely insightful, and I do feel myself to be a part of that movement toward not the typical structure of finance. And I find that to be a really empowering thing, to not necessarily just be shunting my happiness off toward retirement and be like, it all happens over there. I don't know if that's necessarily what a lot of people are thinking, but I'm sure many people
No,
that
that
are
that is what a lot of people are
okay.
thinking.
That's what a lot of
The
people
vast
think.
majority of people.
Yeah.
And that's how I was thinking for up until, I don't know, 2 or 3 years ago, well into my 30s.
Mm.
You know, this idea that, you know, I was never going to stop working in my 60s. The plan was to stop in my 40s or 50s. But still, like, what kind of a God, like, what kind of a life is that? Just
You don't
delaying.
even know what the world's going to be like in 20 years. It could be just like kind of like a apocalyptic hellscape, God
Mm.
forbid.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
I always held
it's
on to
worked
that
out.
too.
What's that?
I always had that in my mind when I was a very young person in high school. I was just like, am I just gonna work my ass off for the next like 40 years, and then 30 years into that, there's gonna be some world cataclysmic changing event, and I'm like, what was all of it for? I never got to the good part. I was like, why
Yeah,
don't I
there's just,
incorporate the good part now?
I was just talking yesterday about this Alan Watts clip. We have to bring up Alan Watts in every podcast. But there's this hilarious clip. I think it was made by the same people that make South Park. And anyways, it's like Alan Watts is just talking about how like you're getting there, it's coming. There's this thing and it's coming and you're getting there, and then finally one day you've arrived and you realize it was all a hoax. He's just talking about the rat race. And oh, I read this
Mhm.
other funny quote the other day. It was like, the thing with the rat race is even if you win, you're still a rat.
Yep, king of the rats.
Yeah, and it's not to say that,
Oh,
you
sorry.
know, preparing for a future where you won't be able to work or you won't want to work. It's, you know, I'm not saying you shouldn't do that, but you shouldn't sacrifice. I'm not going to say everything because nobody sacrifices everything, but you shouldn't make a very significant sacrifice now. Like I say sometimes, you know, it's okay to sacrifice some safety in your 70s for some fun in your 20s and 30s. It's totally okay.
Yeah.
And I see people every day that are in their 20s and 30s and they're just really worried about retirement and like really worried, right? I mean, if I get this gym membership, I'm not gonna be able to retire. Like it's
That's fascinating.
it's just, and that's what I'm talking about, what I was talking about earlier, like that sort of mental block, those scripts, you know, again, it's all the psychology, right? And what was the other thing that I was going to say? um I can't remember.
How
I
many
lost my train of
people?
thought there.
So I don't really have like a good sample size for like what other people are thinking about finance, because it's kind of taboo to talk about. A lot of people aren't just gonna like openly start talking about their finances and their perspective on money. And I'm kind of an outlier, and so you have a unique perspective because I assume you've talked to at least dozens, maybe even hundreds of people, and they've probably opened up to you about their finances and how they're thinking about this. And it sounds to me like a lot of people in their 20s are like thinking about retirement, which is hilarious because I'm not at all thinking about that.
A lot, a lot. And you know, look, young people these days naturally, or I should say young people naturally, and even especially young people these days, you know, that model I think is slowly dying, right? For several reasons. Um, but still, yeah, I mean, there's a huge, I don't know if it's a majority or what, but a huge portion of the young population that is worried about retirement. And I think part of my job is to at least allay those fears in some way, shape, or form. And I do that in different ways, just depending on the person. Like sometimes I just run the numbers. Like, yo, look, here's how much you have in assets right now. If we just assume, you know, let's conservatively assume this pretty low rate of return every year on average. Um, you know, we assume XYZ, let's be conservative. If you know, at 65, like, here's how much money you probably will have, or here's a range of how much money you will have. And it's like, you know, it's typically a pretty big number, right? That's one way to do it, right? I don't think that I use that tactic all that often. I'm not sure that resonates all that well. But then, you know, for other people, it's just like, you know, just having that conversation, like, you know, just kind of like running through the scenario, right? And I love doing like a regret minimization framework. Like, think about like how you are, or sorry, like fast forward to like 60-year-old Chris, right? Or 80-year-old Luke. And like, how does this person feel about the decisions you made over the last 40, 50, 60 years? Right? Would they have wanted you to go on that trip when you're 27 instead of saving, putting in your 401k? Right? Anyway, again, it's one of those things where it's just like, I think of myself as I don't want to use, I hesitate to use this word, but therapist a lot. It's really just kind of like, a lot of like head nodding and listening. It's kind of a 90-10. Like I aim to listen 90% of the time and talk about 10% of the time and just offer suggestions, offer different ways of thinking. Right. It's very little of what I do. And there's some stuff that's like, yes, you have to do it this way, but very little of what I do is like prescriptive. It's much more of just kind of a listening exercise, understanding this person, understanding their goals, their values, their needs, their dreams, their fears, all this stuff, mix it into this bucket, and then saying, okay, like, let's kind of like set like a potential destination, and let's figure out how we can kind of get there, with the understanding that destination is going to change almost certainly.
I
And
want
that's
to.
why I love working with young people, because, from how old are you, Luke?
36.
36. Okay. So you've been through like that late 20s, early 30s, I don't know, window where like life changes a lot, man. Right?
Oh yeah. I went through a
Chris, you're
big,
what? You're
big
you're
shift at
12,
28.
right? How old's Chris?
I just turned
So
13.
Chris is like 25, 26. He doesn't know, because
Yeah.
you're 26, 27, 28. You're surrounded by friends. You've got all this stuff to do. So much freedom. Nowhere's like, and then you wake up and you're 35, and all of a sudden you got a kid or two. You're married. You have no friends. Everybody else is married with kids, or they moved away. Everybody's working. Responsibilities out the ass. And just in those 5 to 10 years, life completely changes. Financial responsibilities are different, and that period from mid 20s to mid 40s to me is just like endlessly fascinating, right? And that's a big reason why I chose to work with that cohort. Is much more so than that, pre-retiree into retiree phase, which is where most of the advisors and most of the money is, right? Oh, this is what I was going to say earlier, and I don't want to go full on nut job here, but I have this working conspiracy theory where the financial firms have sort of leveraged, is that the right word? They've taken the model of, they've basically scared people into this idea of retirement, right? Hey, everybody, watch out, right? At some point, you're going to have to retire. You're going to need this amount of money. Okay. Oh, by the way, we're paid based on how much money you have. So it's kind of like, it's going to the barber and asking if they want a haircut. Like, yes, they want you to grow your money because that's what they're paid on. So they like, this is a decades long, and I don't think there's been any kind of like top down conspiracy. It's just like
No,
it's
just
worked
emergent.
up bottoms up. Yeah, emergent, exactly. Of like these financial firms, they have this business model, and then they've scared people into that idea of, again, collecting this huge pile of assets. Like, who needs $5 million when they're 65? Like, what kind of a lifestyle is that? I don't even understand. You
Yeah.
know?
So
Like,
I
are
have
you
a
gonna are you
bunch of
gonna pivot
thoughts.
that hard from like your very frugal lifestyle your whole life, where everything was, you had what you needed, you did a little bit, and you're like, now I'm 65, now I'm gonna ball out and just like go like I don't know, paragliding on the yacht. It's like, how well is paragliding gonna work for you at 65 when you should have done it at
Mhm.
27? It's like
And
So
it's not a value judgment, like, you do you, right? I'm a big believer in you do you, like whatever makes you happy. But like, let's run through that exercise. Like, do you think that actually will make you happy at that age? Right? Will make you feel safe and secure and confident and fulfilled. Like, that's what I'm all about. I keep using that word happy. I don't know why I've been using that word, because I don't like it. I think
right.
fulfilled is a better term.
Mhm.
Um, but anyways, I'm going
So
off the rails
I have
now.
no plan to retire because I have no plan to work a job that I want to retire from. So I'm just gonna work till I'm dead. And what work means to me is probably different than what work for me is making original contributions to the world and trying to be useful. And so I have no reason to ever stop doing that. But probably a lot of people think about the word work as employment, and they probably don't really like employment because it generally really sucks. So they probably have anxiety from that. They might even be shallow breathing, and they project that anxiety onto their finances, and they're already thinking about retirement in their 20s because they don't really like what they're doing and they want to retire.
Yeah, they want to be done with it.
And
Yeah.
the great irony is, once you get into your 60s and stuff, and you've been doing the same thing for 40 years, it's very hard to make big life changes when you're that kind of ossified in your ways. And my dad is coming up on 70 years old, and he doesn't want to retire. because he doesn't know what he would do with all that time. So now he's working part-time. He has tons of money and he doesn't even really like to travel that much anymore. So there's nothing really to spend it on. And I realized that I don't want to die with any money. I want to have spent almost all of it or given it away or used it for something. And if I die with millions of dollars, then I couldn't figure out a way to be useful with that money. And that would be unfortunate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, well said. I have a couple of things I just want to loop back on from what Devin was sharing. One of them is this notion of how he found himself listening 90% of the time to the people in front of him and unwittingly assuming the role of therapist. And I'm just noticing, in our digital age, where people are more and more isolated from one another and lacking like that real human connection, if you can get yourself in front of, even via Zoom, if you can get yourself in front of one human who actually is a listening ear for you, that's going to be a very healing experience for you. And so I'm sure there's people in so many walks of life, whether it's financial advisement or recovery coaching or, whatever else, who are now also therapists, because people need therapy. People need talk therapy because they need to actually like express themselves and feel heard and received by another human. So yeah, it is interesting that has kind of found its way into a lot of those one-on-one dynamics. The other thing that I wanted to ask you about is, you were saying, it's all about mindset. It's all about mindset as to whether you are enjoying your relationship with money, whether you have 5 million or 5,000. And I'm wondering if, in interacting with some of the more wealthy demographic, do you find that there's predominantly more this attitude of grasping after money, that it still feels scarce even though it's plentiful, and that maybe that grasping, that scarcity mentality is what has led them to accumulate so much, and they still fail to recognize how much is there, and that the attitude hasn't changed, so that the grasping continues into infinity, seemingly sensibly or senselessly. What do you think about that?
I definitely see some of the scarcity mindset for sure. What I see a lot more of is kind of this achievement mindset, where, some significant portion of the people that I talk to, again, young people with enough wherewithal and cash flow to, understand that they could use a service like mine and have the ability to pay for it. Right. So you can imagine it's kind of like the young urban elite is who I see a lot of. And, a lot of Ivy League educated, straight A students that have done nothing but kill it for the past 15, 20 years. And it's difficult for them to make any kind of a shift. It's really hard. And I get that. Right. A lot of their identity is tied up in their situation, in their job, right, in their income. And I know Chris and I are involved in like the pathless path of kind of the find the others, the weirdo, the creator community. And you want to walk away from that and be a writer. Well, your income drops by 90%. You don't have that nice fancy name on your LinkedIn anymore. That's much more difficult than I think the potentially the scarcity mindset. If that makes any sense. Again, just in my, again, I've talked to hundreds of people, but it's not like I've talked to millions, or, I've like looked at the research, which I'm not sure I really believe in anyways, but that's kind of what I see a lot more of than that scarcity.
Mm-hmm.
I think that scarcity stuff, when I hear scarcity, I hear like that, the FIRE movement, which I think that idea is fading a bit, but where you save for 10, 20, 30 years, and all of a sudden you're supposed to kind of like turn on the spigot and start spending. Again, go back to it, man. It's all psychology. And I love what you said, like your relationship with money. Like, what does that look like? Is it healthy or is it unhealthy? And you can go to any extreme, whether it's extreme frugality or extreme spending. Neither of those things are healthy. So you just got to kind of find that balance. I don't know. It's a lot, man. I'm not sure I could sum it up in 10, 15, 20 minutes. And I don't know if anybody could ever sum it up. I think it's just one of those topics that's unbelievably broad and deep, where, like I said earlier, it's not something that you can really like become an expert in. It's just something that you have to kind of wade through and try to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Like physical fitness or nutrition. Like, you're never going to know everything. Just figure out what works for you, what makes the most sense, find some balance, lean into your, what you like, dive into your body and your breath and understand what feels good for you. And then just keep doing that every day. I don't know.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So many people in middle school or high school, or maybe just around puberty, want to start developing an identity or some sense of who they are, so that they can be an individual unit and they can have something that is other people are interested in, and they can be unique and they can be attractive and they can be worthwhile. And so many people just go on and on from that initial concept of me as a human. And I'm sure the really high achievers are very solid in having a very strong sense of me and I amness. And yeah, to shift that after so many years of it going well has got to be a challenge. I'm a top performing student, and now I'm a top performing worker, and now I'm earning great amounts of money, and all of my investment in this identity seems to have been paying off. But now I'm starting to see some issues. Now there's some things creeping in. Now I'm actually like getting depressed or getting burnt out or getting overworked, or not even finding myself enjoying my actual downtime because I'm just too committed to the work mode or something of that nature. So yeah, to give up something that has been working so well is not an easy thing. And that's kind of where the practice of becoming less attached finds itself to be a very valuable thing. And can we continue to do the right things but not be so attached to the methodology or to the outcome, and to stay flexible?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, it's not about my beliefs. It's not about what I want. It's about what you want. Whether it's, my client or just some random person on the street. All I ask is that you take a second to try to dive into your body and your feelings and figure out what it is that you actually want. Not what your parents want, not what Instagram wants, not what society wants. What do you want? What do you want? And then figure out how to get there. That's my whole kind of thesis.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
Right.
Love that.
So there you go. By the way, I would love to wrap up in like 5 minutes because I got an 11, and
sure.
Would like I got not so much prep, just like take a break from freaking Zoom. So
yeah,
you know what I mean?
hear you.
Yeah, do some breath work maybe.
Definitely.
So, I just was reminded of this quote that one of the biggest predictors of success for like an entrepreneur, like who's going to become the entrepreneur, the successful entrepreneur, is the ability to work a low status job for a prolonged period of time. Because when you first start out, it's a pretty low status job. Obviously, a successful entrepreneur might be a high status position, but you're basically just grinding by yourself, really not getting paid. And like, so yeah, a lot of these people who were achievement minded, getting good grades, getting the corporate job with the high salary and the fancy title, it's hard to make that leap into the entrepreneurial space, because it's all of a sudden it's a big status drop. And just to your point, that might even be more important to people than the actual income, is the status they get from that identity.
Well, yeah, especially if they're in a corporate situation, because you're spending most of your waking hours at work. And so if you finally have achieved a level of recognition within that ecosystem, then it's going to be, you might be reluctant to give that up. It's just like the popular handsome jock at high school like hates when high school ends, because he's just like, no, my enclosure, like, where did it go? Like, what is this vast open expanse? Like,
what was that shift like for you, Devin?
Which shift?
I mean, my understanding is that you were working as an employee, probably for a corporation, and now you're not. You're working for yourself, independent. Did you just say, you know what, I don't care about the status of like working for like a big name corporation, having a vice president title? That's just
I never cared about the status. It was never for me. And that's the thing. It was easy for me, well, relatively easy for me to leave that situation, 15-year, fairly, what do you call it? fairly like high status, a lot of prestige, a lot of sexy names and jobs in my past. I didn't care one bit about that. That being said, there's a reason why, working for a company, being an employee has generated probably more wealth than any single activity in the history of the world. Like it's not all bad. Like I just want to make that clear. Like a lot of people really love their jobs, right? And I don't know what the number is, 40, 50, 60%, but it's a hefty number there. I just think of all the bankers that I know, consultants, like some people they just love that shit. They love the politics. They love making money. They love telling people what to do. It just wasn't for me. There's just, I don't want to go into all the negative things, but it just wasn't for me on net. It was 100%. I hated it, and zero, there was a lot to like about it. I really enjoyed a lot of my time there. But at the end of the day, it was just about me wanting to kind of do my own thing. Right. And, it was really just about that autonomy and that freedom at the end of the day, because I'm not affiliated with any sort of company or broker dealer or anything. I don't have any employees. I don't have any managers. I'm a lone wolf out there. I'm definitely beholden to my clients in some way, shape, or form, but like I work with who I want, when I want, from where I want. Right. I mean, that's it. I write what I want. I do podcasts on what I want. I don't have anybody telling me what to do. And that right there for me, I'm just a very, I don't know what you want to call it, like independent person, which by the way, doesn't make me a top-notch husband, because I love to be on my own in a lot of ways, right? In a marriage, as a partnership, I'm just not great at it naturally. And that's something that I have to work on. It's good for being a lone wolf entrepreneur for sure. Right. But that was just what I wanted in my work life. At the same time, like the stars aligned for me to kind of take that leap. Everybody's got their own story. Everybody's got their own path. And, it's never a perfect time to do it, but sometimes are better than others. And it worked out for me to do it now when I was what, 36 or whatever, 37, when I officially made the leap. So yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is like, I'm doing, again, like I said earlier, like I'm doing what I think is best for me and my family. Right. And I can only speak to my experience, and I'm not going to sit here and tell anybody to do it. All I can say is that if you're feeling that inkling, if you're not comfortable or at home or fulfilled in whatever role it is, right? You could be a helicopter ski instructor in Colorado, and you're just like, like I don't love this. Figure out what it is that you love. Maybe you want to be an employee. And side note, like there's a lot of things there's a lot that I miss about being an employee. A lot. It's a great life. It's a in a lot of ways it's a basic life, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. I just think that it's kind of overtaken our society in a lot of ways, and we all worship at the altar of our employers, and damn your family, damn your mental health, damn your relationships, and it's all at the expense of some sort of paycheck. So that's what I just don't. I'm not here. I'm not here for. Just analyze. Take a step back and analyze. That's all I ask. So
I'd like to just close out with what I found to be a really powerful call to action from something you shared just a minute ago. One of the main things that you do with people that you meet with, this notion of getting clear on what it is you actually want, dropping the notions that may have been placed upon you by your parents, by your school, by movies, by things that you've seen about what it is you should want, what it is that they think you should want, and actually becoming clear, and maybe even using meditation, maybe even using like intense exercise, and then in that period of stillness that resides afterwards, get clear. What do you actually want as a human? Not just what your girlfriend wants for you, not just what your wife wants for you. What do you want? And go from there, because then you have a goal. And then as you have a goal, you can begin to shape your actions and build structures around the movement toward that goal. So yeah, that level of personal autonomy and that level of personal clarity, I think, is just something that is so needed right now for so many people, and myself included. So thank you for sharing that with us, Devin. And thank you so much for being here with us today.
Yeah, thanks, guys. This was awesome. Would be happy to do it again. This is my first podcast as a guest, I think.
Awesome.
I'm supposed to be on another one in a couple of weeks, but wherever this leads, at the very least, like let's catch up again soon. I dig. Obviously, I know Chris, but Luke, definitely dig your vibe. If you guys have any like resources, especially with the breath stuff, like I'm I'm all in on like kind of what do you want to call it, like just getting better, right? Personal growth, and
Yeah.
breath is one of the things. Like I said, I've already got my little yoga thing, but just anything, like send it my way. You got my email. I'm all about just like continuing to learn.
Yeah.
So and get better.
Just wrapping up, Luke is a Kundalini yoga coach. He does one-on-one coaching calls, and I personally benefited from that. Learned a lot,
Hmm.
and we'll have links in the descriptions to get in touch with Luke, get in touch with Devin. We'll put resources in the show notes, and we'd like to get to know our audience. So please feel free to book a call with us. And Devin, once again, thank you, Luke. Another great conversation. Let's do it again soon.
Awesome. Yeah.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Take care, guys.
Bye.
See you soon.
See ya.